everyone. Today we're going to work on the Brother Scan and Cut, and I have the SDX225. So I have the one with the automatic knife. What would you call that? Well, they just call it the automatic knife. Excuse me. So if you don't, make sure you do a test cut before you start. So today we're going to talk about half square triangles. I guess we can stick squares up here too. So when you're quilting, sometimes you need a lot of squares, a lot of half square triangles, and this is quarter square triangles. So half square is literally half the square. Quarter square is 4 pieces. So I'm going to show you how we do this. The first thing is this fabric, this cutting is done on fabric that does not have steam seam or fusible web behind it. And I'm going to just grab a couple little pieces here. So we're cutting on cutting with just fabric. So I use the fabric mat. Now the fabric mat is for the newer machines, but if you have an older machine, you would in most of the time in the stuff you get, unless you get one that's like Amazon or somewhere that gives you very little extra with it, but you can take your standard mat and they give you 2 sheets of this extra sticky square, 12-inch square, to put on your standard mat so it becomes a fabric mat. So if you do that, make sure you mark it, somewhere along the bottom with a marker, fabric mat, so you don't use it for anything else because it's so sticky, whatever you put on there would never come back off again. So we're going to be using the fabric mat, and this is the fabric or the thin blade. It's the gold one. See how it matches, the colors match. So just if you want to get that prepared, if you're going to try it out with me. So I'm going to zoom in for a minute. So what I wanted to mention is, we have lots of shapes on the machine already. So if you want to do a square, you can do it right from here, making it whatever size you want. Now, they do have a triangle, a half square triangle right here. The problem is if you take a square piece of fabric, you only need to cut one line across to get you 2 pieces. If you use this, it's going to cut twice in the center. So and we can't get just a line, so we're going to do this whole method on the Brother canvas. So let's switch over. So before we get started with our cutting and showing how to do the half square triangles, we're going to make sure our fabric is properly prepared. And it doesn't matter if you're on the Cricut or you're on the Brother Scan and Cut, or you're using, for example, like the Crafter's Companion Gemini. You want to make sure your fabric is well pressed, and also that you use starch, or I use Best Press. Best Press doesn't draw blood. We don't want it to draw blood. Doesn't draw bugs, and it doesn't flake. So I use that, and you can check the links below for the items I recommend in my sewing and cutting and so forth. So we want to make sure we do that. And when you press, make sure when you spray some on, you iron it until it's dry. So if you iron it and you pick it up and you can feel it's still damp, you haven't activated the starch or the Best Press. Iron it till it's dry, and then turn it to the other side and iron it until it's dry. And that way it'll have a little more body to it, and it'll just cut that much smoother. So I'm on the Brother Canvas workspace, and I'm using the PC one on my computer. The first thing I want to do is come over to the left under the shapes, and I'm just going to click on a square. And there we have our square. And I'm just going to move it down a little, and I'm going to zoom in a little more. So I'm up at the top left. I'm going to zoom in more just so it's easier for you to see it. And you should zoom in as well when you're working in something rather than squinting or it's hard to see. Just make it easy on yourself. So here's our square. So we're going to make a square, a half square triangle, and a quarter square triangle for our basic shape. So here's my square. I'm going to come over to the right under Edit, and I'm just going to make this a 3-inch square. So I'm going to put a 3 in the width. Now just hit the Tab key, and that'll make sure it's 3 by 3. If for some reason it's not, uncheck this Maintain Aspect Ratio. Get them so they're both 3, and then click it back on. So if you do change it, it'll change them both the same because we want to have a square. And if I click out here on the blank spot, you can see that we have our square. So I'm going to just set that right there. I'm going to right click and I'm going to duplicate because I already have my square. Now I'm going to do my half square triangle. My half square triangle, I'm going to run a line from the top right to the bottom left. You can go from the top left to the bottom right. Either way works. I'm going to come over to the left and I'm going to get the straight line or the path. Now, you see, I'm not sure if I can see that close to get to that little corner. So I'm going to come up here on the top left. I'm going to click on the zoom. And I'm just going to come in a little ways. I'm going to make sure I click off of the zoom or it'll keep doing it. So I'm going to click on my arrow. And I'm going to move this up a bit so I can see, you can see each end. So I'll go ahead again and get my path and my straight line tool. I'm going to click right in this corner. I'm not clicking and dragging, I just clicked. And I'm going to come down to this corner, I'm going to double click. So now I have that line. So I'm gonna click it with my. I'm gonna click out in this open area. I'm gonna zoom back just so you can see both of them. And so I have my square. Excuse me. My half square triangle. I'm gonna select the half square triangle or the square with a line in it. And I'm going to come down. I'm still in the edit. I'm going to come down right here on the sort of bottom right. And I'm going to do the center vertical and the center horizontal. That's just making sure that this line and the square are lined up together. So now and the other thing I want to do before I forget is I want to make sure I group them. So I can just right click and group. Now if I move it around, everybody stays together. But more importantly, when I send it over to the scan and cut machine, I want to make sure this line stays right where it is. So we're going to group it. The other thing we have to deal with is we want the line, the diagonal line, to cut before it cuts a square. I find if we cut the square first, and then the diagonal line, when the knife, and I'm using the knife because I haven't got the rotary cutter yet, it's been back ordered, but the knife kind of drags a bit. So what will happen is these two, this square is now not attached to the rest of the fabric if I'm on my scan and cut. So when the knife comes into this corner to start, it tends to drag the fabric with it. So what we really want to do, opposite of what we would do if we were quilting, is we want to cut the diagonal line, then cut the square out. So if we come over to the right and we go down 1, 2, 3, the fourth one looks like a sandwich. And what we want to do, and it's called the layers, and what we want to do is we want the line to cut before the square. Now, if you look at this, you think, oh, it's going to start from here and go down. It starts from the bottom and goes up. So if I just click on this line, the diagonal line, and move it down, now it's going to cut the diagonal line before the square, and that's what we want. So now we have our square and we have our half square. So I'm going to select the half square. I'm going to right click and I'm going to duplicate. Because now, let me put them side by side. Here we go. Now I need quarter square, which means I need another diagonal line in the opposite direction, so it makes an X. So if I click over on the right in the layers, if I click on this line, you see I'm on the right, I'm going to right click and I'm going to duplicate. And that's duplicating the line. You see, it looks like it's a square, but it's really just the line. The outline always goes around in a square or rectangle to the furthest points. But before I do anything, I want to make sure I move this down. And it doesn't matter if it's which line is first, as long as the square is last. So you see I move that other line down, but it's heading in the wrong direction. Right here is a little circle, and you can see my cursor turn to like a little circle arrow. If I hold my shift key down on my keyboard and I turn this, you see how it turns in full increments so that I'm not like 43.5 on my turn or 87. But now we're out of line. Easy to take care of. We're going to come across, grab everything. We're going to come back to the edit. Oh. All right, let me see if I ungroup this. Let me ungroup. There we go. I wasn't getting my choices here. Let me just do undo so you can see the difference. So see, when I grabbed onto all of this, the square and the two lines, do you see how this is grayed out? So what I needed to do is I just ungrouped everything. Do you see how I now have the options that I need? I just want to make sure that I've got them all. And if I go back to the layers, I can you see how these three are blue? That means I've selected them. So I can then go back to the edit, come down to the align. I want the center vertical, center horizontal. Everything is lined up now. I'm going to right click and group. I just want to go back and double check my layers. It starts at the bottom. I have a square. My next group is the diagonal line first, then the square. My next group is diagonal line in one direction, diagonal line in the other direction, and the square. And that's all we have to do to have this template, so to speak, to send over to the Scan and Cut. Now I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to do File, Save As. I don't want to do Export. If I export it, it exports it as an FCM, and it exports it. If you want it as an FCM to your computer, you have to go to the export. But I want to keep it as what they call a working file, which means that I can come into it anytime and fix everything that I need to fix or add to it. I've already done one, so I'm going to go ahead and use the same name again, and I just called it half square, quarter square. Tried to keep it simple. And now I'm all set. I can make these now any size I want, either here or over on the machine. So we're going to go ahead and save a set to the machine. So we're going to go up to File. Now we're going to export. And we're going to go to the center one. The first one is if we're going to go to the computer as an FCM, and an FCM file is what the Scan and Cut reads. Other machines read an SVG. Scan and Cut can read the SVG, but it also reads the FCM. We're going to transfer. I'm going to transfer it wirelessly, and I can tell by the three little lines here. If you don't have wireless, you pick the bottom one, and you'll set up your cable from your computer to your Scan and Cut before you do this. I'm just going to click on the wireless one. Should get the green. If you don't get the green, the machine might not be on, or just try it again, see what you've done incorrectly. You might be outside of the mat, but generally it'll tell you that. And we're just going to hit OK. And now we're going to go head over to the scan and cut. And now we just go to retrieve data. We're going to use that same symbol that we sent it with a little wireless on it. And if for some reason it wasn't here, then go ahead and send it again. So the first thing we want to do, though, is we want to save this to the machine. Because now they'll be in the machine all the time until you erase them. So we're going to say OK. And let's just say we aren't going to work on these right now. We're just going to hit the home and be done. Say you have other things to do. Now we can come in, retrieve data, go to the machine, go to the very end, because it would be the last thing we did. There it is. I'm going to say OK. Now we're going to edit this. Let's say I want that square to be a different size. I'm going to come into the size, and let's say I want it to be 2 inches. Well, let's say 2.5. That's all we have to do, okay? If we need a bunch of them, we would click right here, and let's say, okay, I want 2 of them. All right, and we're just going to drag it down. Don't get all invested in moving these around because you're going to scan in your fabric and move them then. So let's say we want this half square triangle. The directions on our quilting pattern says, cut a 2.5-inch square and cut on the diagonal for a half square triangle. We're going to do the same thing. I'm going to make it 2.5. Okay, now it sized that with the line all together. So we don't have to worry about, is the line the right size? No. We grouped this together before we sent it over to the scan and cut. So they came in, it came in as one piece. The same with this one. If we want this to be a different size, let's say 2 3/4. It sized the 2 cuts the same as the square. So once you have these in your machine, you can go ahead and make them any size you want. Now just keep in mind, this works if your pattern instruction says, cut a 4-inch square, cut it once on the diagonal. If you have a pattern that tells you, and let me back up a little bit here. Oop, wrong way. It tells you to take 2 squares, whatever size they may be. Oop, we got extra fabrics here. No, it's 2 squares. If it tells you to take 2 squares and put them right sides together and draw a line down, and then it wants you to sew on either side of that line, these do not work for that. These are if you have instructions that say, cut 5 squares, 4 inches, and then cut them in half on the diagonal. That's when this works. If it tells you to take 2 squares, draw a line, and let me get a pencil just so you get a visual of what I'm talking about. And it tells you to draw a line, and it wants you to sew a 1/4 inch on either side from the line, then you have to do it this way, like I have right here. So there's instructions do it in different ways, because it's going in a 1/4 inch on each side, but it made the original squares a different size than these are, excuse me, to get to the same place. I hope that makes sense without too much confusion. So let me just back up a little bit here. I don't think we need to be that far back. And we'll just go ahead and do a couple of the cuts. Now, let's just say, oh, I'm going to zoom back in for a minute. Let's just say we brought the 3 in, but we don't need any squares. We just need the half square. We're going to make sure that we're highlighted or the red's around one of the ones we want to get rid of. So we want to keep this half square. We want to get rid of the others. We're going to come over here. Let me turn this a little bit. We're going to come over right here and select it. And I was trying to think of which one. Well, it's 2 ways. So let's do this one first. So we're going to click on this side. And then what we can do is highlight what we want. Now, I'm going to go back and I'm going to say, okay, this is the one this is the one I want. This is the one I want. These are the one I don't want. Now it's a little easier to use that feature. So that here's the guy we want down here. We're going to do okay, okay. Oh, you see how it grabbed that one? We don't want that. So let's go back one more time. Then I'll just show you another way. We want to grab just the ones we don't want. Okay, they're red. Okay, they're still the red ones, and we just hit the trash. If you want to just be easier about it, or probably less confusing, you just have to take any of the ones that you want to delete, make sure the red box is around it, hit the trash, hit the trash, hit the trash, and now we have just the one that we wanted. So let me put some fabric down. And again, I'm not going to worry about where the square is, the half square triangle is, until I scan in my mat. I'm using the fabric mat. I'm right here. It's a little hot. Let me see if I can come over to this side. I'm using the fabric mat. I'm putting my fabric down. I want to make sure that I roller it down. Okay, I'm going to feed in my machine. I'm going to move my roller, I had it in the back. I don't want to run into it. Okay, I'm going to come in a little further now so you can see the script. Oh, that's a little too far. Sorry, I didn't mean to make you nauseous there. Now, I hadn't put my knife in yet. I don't put my knife in anymore until I'm ready to cut, because I've twice now had my fabric knife in, forgot to change it, and was cutting cardstock with my fabric knife. I don't want to do that. So for me, I've had to learn to not put my knife in until I'm ready. And you can see I put it in right there. Okay, so that might help you too. And again, let me come in just a tad more. See if I can turn it enough. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I can't scan my mat here. I've got to hit OK. Here's the button for scanning in my mat. And now I can move my cut file over onto my fabric. So I could kind of fussy cut it if I wanted to. I don't know if you can see it any better if I move up a little closer. There, you can see it a little better now. So what I did was, let me back up just a tad. There we go. So in your little wrench, you have the option background, off, light and dark. So I had it on dark, and that's how it looks. But it's a little hard to see. I can see it in person, and you can probably see it. But sometimes if it's a little hard to see the red box, if you just hit your wrench and then go to the lighter one, you see I can see where my fabric is, and now I can see that red box much easier. So flip back and forth as you need to on that. So I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to select Cut, and I'm going to start. And it's all done. I'm going to unload my mat. And I'm just going to pick this up so you can see it. I want to take the big piece off first. Let me grab a hold of it. Here we go. I'm going to take the big piece off. Rather than scraping, trying to find the pieces I cut, I'm going to take the big piece off first. And then there's 1, 2 of my half square triangles. Now, if you have to do a bunch of them, you can fill this mat with one big piece of fabric or whatever you need, line them up all in a row. Let me show you a little quick way on that. So let me hit OK. And here's our 2 half square triangles. And generally, you'll be doing more than one color because 2 half squares usually 2 different colors. But let's move this up a little bit more. And I'll show you one last thing. So we're going to go back. And let's say we need 10 of those. So we're going to go into Edit. Edit Object. We're going to pick this one right here. That's how many we want. And it's counting the one that's there also. So you wouldn't do 9 and think that the one that's already on the mat is number 10. This is total. So let's say we need 10 of them. And see how they're all in a row like that or in a mess like that? So we're going to do OK and OK. And right here, we can have them so that if they're odd shapes, they'll fit in closer. We can have rows. We're going to just pick this bottom one. And see how it lined them all up? So then you would just take about a 12-inch, it looks like about a 12 by 10-inch piece of fabric, and just cut away. And then you'd have 10 of them done, so you would have 20 half square triangles. So that makes it pretty simple. And again, if you want to be back to 1, we'll do that one more time. I'm right here. So the one on the right would have selected them all. Now, because that one is highlighted, it's going to pick that. So if I went up here and hit OK, you see how that one is still highlighted, which is fine because we're just going to keep 1. This button would be Select All. Hit OK. We just have to hit the trash 1 time this time, and now we're back to our 1. Now, we're not gonna save this unless you want to save a whole sheet. So let's say you wanted to save a whole sheet, and we'll pretend there's a whole sheet. When we hit Save in the machine, it's going to come up and say, do you want to override our original 3, the square, the half square, and the quarter square? Well, no, we wouldn't want to override it. We'd want a new one because we don't want to override and lose the 3 we have. If you do, it's not the end of the world because you saved them on your computer. So that's how you're going to have your square, half square triangle, quarter square triangle. There's our new pieces. And it's not the same size, but we'll pretend it is. So you wouldn't have two colors the same going back together. So you would have at least two colors. So you could cut a bunch with one color, then cut a bunch, keep that same bunch, put your new fabric on, scan your fabric in again, and cut the next bunch without even redoing anything. So I hope that helps you out. If you'd like to do some quilting or placemats, anything, it doesn't have to be something big, but try that out. But make sure you're using the fabric mat, or if you have an older machine that doesn't take the fabric mat, you're going to take your standard mat and apply the extra glue, it for lack of a better word, the extra sticky square, and it's the same size, it's 12 inches, onto your standard mat, and then that becomes a fabric mat. So make sure that you mark that mat down along here somewhere. Don't get anywhere in your writing, but down along here somewhere, make sure you mark it fabric. It'll have a greenish blue tint cover that you can put on so you'll know, and you'll keep that as your fabric mat. If you ever want to change it back to the standard, you can peel that layer off that you put on, and it's back to the standard mat. So I hope you enjoyed that video, and give it a try and see how you like having your pieces come out all the same size. See you next time. Bye.